This is the Retirement Solution Podcast with financial advisor Jon Hicks, founder of J. Hagan Capital.
Glad to have you here with us on the Retirement Solution with financial advisor Jon Hicks, founder of J. Hagan Capital, helping folks understand the mountain, the cornucopia, the superabundance of things that you have to wrap your arms and head around when it comes to retirement planning. Used to be so simple, John. We used to just have, we had
it was easy.
The three-legged stool. We had the pension, we had the Social Security, we had the savings, and we only had 10 years.
That's it. That's right.
So,
I mean, there wasn't much to think about if you're like, I need my retirement to last. And unfortunately, you just kind of kick the bucket the day after you quit working. There wasn't much of a retirement to really go to. Now it's crazy.
With all of our
some of those
green juices and vitamins.
That's right.
And Pilates.
Oh, absolutely. You don't drink grass juice every day? I absolutely drink grass juice every single day. I don't. And or kombucha or any of that stuff. I don't know. I don't want any of that.
Take care of yourself. Take your vitamin C. Drink your water. And plan accordingly. That's right. What you are here to help us figure out in a couple of ways. There are a couple of different angles I want to talk to you about in this conversation. One, what it is that you do, because, I think at this point, especially if you are listening to this, you know what a financial advisor is. You've heard of financial advisors, but how about financial coaches? Because licensed financial advisors, they concentrate on more of the traditional stuff that you think about. You think about stock investments, you think about saving for retirement. Financial coaches, however, focus on things like paying down debt, financial education, but they cannot give investment advice. So
Sure.
A recent article on Morningstar.com was talking about how financial advisors need to start evolving in the work that they do and include the area of financial coaching and what those services bring to the table. I think that really speaks to the work that you do every single day, because especially when it comes to financial advising for retirees, it requires so much coaching, so much emotional coaching. And then we add the element for you, one particular area that you've recently discovered a big hole where people need help is exit strategies from a business or perhaps
Absolutely.
a major investment that they are counting on to fund their retirement. So let's talk about how you coach your clients through these kinds of financial transitions, these exit strategies.
Yeah. So, when you kind of think about it, many of us could go and do our own research and select investments. And historically, this is probably why a lot of investment advisors, they're not very high in the food chain. And when people think, hey, I need to go get some great advice today, let me go find a financial advisor, because they're fearful they're going to be sold some group of products or some junk that they don't want. And the craziest thing is, when I think about my day to day and what I actually end up doing for our clients, it's almost 100% holistic coaching. It's trying to figure out, hey, do we understand our budget? Do we know what we would need to have to be able to retire the way we want? Yes, you could retire tomorrow, but you may not be able to get that car you were thinking about, or you may not be able to live in the house that you want to, and or you may not be able to relocate. But if we make a couple minor changes, then we could actually accomplish all those things sooner than you think. And there's a difference, right? Coaching is really more of a framework, a guide, someone to help you through the questions. Because most of the time, I think when you go to see a financial advisor, say, well, exactly how much money do you want to have every month? Half the people I have no flipping clue what you're talking about, John. I don't even know what I spend on a monthly basis. No problem. That's where we typically start. Hey, how much money comes in roughly right now? If you look at your paycheck, take some taxes out, take out some healthcare costs, what you actually living off of? And people realize, wow, that's not as much as I thought. Right. And that's great. And if that's the case, then it means that you could probably retire a little bit earlier than you thought.
Okay.
Now, there's those other sides of us, though, right? We're like, I bet I could live off 50 grand. And you find out that they get a $250,000 annual income, and they're kind of using a lot of it. Now, they're saving some money, but they're using a lot of it. Why? Nice vacations, a little bit nicer cars. They like to travel. They like to do certain things. They eat out a lot, and nothing is wrong with that either. But one of the first things that we start looking at is, how do you want your life to be? Forget the investments. Those will happen over time. What do you want to accomplish? Do you want to leave, working when you're 60? What about 70? Because that's easy to understand. But many of the times, financial advisors, I think, lose it. They need to talk about how important this one investment is over another, or how much better Schwab is than Fidelity, or Vanguard versus T. Rowe Price, or what. That I have found to be almost meaningless. Most of the time, I found most product talk to be meaningless.
Okay.
People want to know, dude, if I do decide to retire next year, am I going to make it? I mean, can I still have the new bass boat? Can I still have someone else mow my grass? Because even though I'd be retired and have the time, man, I got 3 acres out there. I don't want to bush hog that stuff. I still want to pay someone to do it. Can I do that? Right? And that's the big important part, but that usually requires coaching. So typically coaching is a little different because number one, we're looking at everything. We're looking at how do you really want to live your life? How are you currently living your life? Do you like that? Do you want to live a little bit more high on the hog when you retire or a little less? How many years do you think you're going to feel good? What about your parents? Did their knees and hips start really bugging them where they didn't want to travel much in their 70s? Well, that's fine. Well, let's plan a lot of your vacations and stuff earlier on. And why would we do that? Well, because we don't want you to say, man, I really wanted to do that Tuscany vacation, but my knees were bugging me so much I wasn't able to go, even though we saved the money.
Yeah.
But if you'd gone 3 years earlier, maybe you could have. Right? So those things that coaches do differently. A lot of education, a lot of empowerment, a lot of rah-rah bon-ton. Hey, you can do it. Relax. We have a plan for it. We can do it. And most financial advisors, I find, I don't know, they kind of miss a little bit of that. It's not anything derogatory, but they think that the investment matters more.
Right.
It doesn't. It's your goals. That's what it really boils down to.
Your goals into a plan to help you live the life you want is the planning process. This is what Jon and his team at J. Hagan Capital are doing every single day, ready to do for you as well. RetirementSolutionRadio.com to start the conversation about your plan. So let's talk about then the idea of an exit strategy for people that maybe are not as traditionally invested, right? There is market investments. And then there is this other group of people that you yourself, you've recently started understanding more, this space that people really need some extra help, some extra coaching through.
Absolutely. So if you look at like small business owners or people that do a lot of real estate, they kind of have a little bit of different situation. Many small business owners, they may have had a really good income, or they may have kind of put their blood, sweat, and tears into that business that they're hoping that they can either gift to the next generation but retain an income or sell it. And these have completely different structures behind them. How are we going to exit from that position or that job or that business or that strip mall or whatever it is, that we own, because it requires different planning, right? Because a lot of the times if we've put a lot of money in our business or in our real estate, we maybe don't have as much other savings. Why? Because we've been coddling that business. We didn't have as much money to put inside of a 401k, or we didn't start it early enough because we were putting all of our money to pay for more marketing, to pay for more people, to get more operations assistants, to realign with our vendors or whatever we're doing. So exiting from a lot of those things really requires a tremendous amount of planning, because a lot of people sell their businesses for a third of what they could typically get if they plan wisely an exit strategy. Really, seriously. Because a lot of it comes with the emotion. How much is that business really worth? But then also understanding, if you're at a point where you're getting ready to think about winding it down, would you put some of those things in place that the next owner would want? And would that be valuable? Often those are tremendous things that are not very costly, but they require some forethought. If you were looking at what is your business really worth today, and you think about, well, but would I pay that for it? And a lot of people would say, well, I know it's worth this because I've put all this money into it, but I don't know if I'd pay that for it, right? And so what we want to do is we want to maximize that value. And so a lot of this comes from the understanding of how's the taxes going to work on that transaction? What about the income? But the biggest one that I see is, how are you going to basically separate yourself and often that identity from what you're selling?
Okay.
And that's a tough one. I remember growing up in one of the small families, and there was I think 3 brothers, but they all owned one of those big tire stores. It was a big one. They had locations all over the place, and they had a huge booming business. It was awesome. Everyone that got their tires, and we had to do that every so often, they all went to this company. They all went to this one family. And that family realized, wow, they had built an unbelievable cash cow. One of the brothers wanted to sell. He's like, man, I'm looking at this. I don't know if I want to keep getting up at 6 a.m., making the coffee, doing all the, I just don't know if I want to do it. He decided that he was going to divest himself from the business. They ended up getting an unbelievable offer to sell the company, and they get a ton of money. And all 3 of those brothers were completely, unbelievably unhappy, even just a year afterward. They couldn't believe it. It was their identity. It was their family. It was They had generations of grandkids that came in and made coffee and cookies. And all of a sudden they realized, even though they got a big check, there was a huge void in their lives. And so that was something they didn't think through. What are they going to do after? One of them ended up going and buying a competing tire company in the next county over. He absolutely did, with part of those proceeds to try to redo it again.
Okay.
But it's just one of those things, and you hear the stories. and I can't remember the statistic, but it's really high. It's more than 60% of people, and I can't remember what it is, but they're completely unhappy after they've sold their business. Not because it wasn't a good deal, not because they didn't get the right amount of money, but often because they didn't prepare themselves either emotionally or sometimes financially for what that was going to look like. What are they going to do next? So it's one of the things I've said on the show for almost 15 years now. It's not what you retire from, it's about what you're retiring to. And a lot of the exit strategy design, how we want to look at this is, what do you really want your time spent doing? Do you want to relocate to Florida? Do you have grandkids in Texas? Do you not want to travel at all? What would you like to do? Are you going to spend more time with your church group or your friends? Or what are you going to do? And a lot of people say, well, we're just going to travel. And they realize, man, travel, not only does it eat up a little bit of money, sometimes it's a little exhausting. And they just can't travel that much. So it's one of those things that if you're a small business owner and you're looking at structuring, consider looking at a CEPA, which is a certified exit planning analyst. And these guys are really built to do exactly what we're talking about, making sure we're emotionally ready, financially ready, and making sure you're getting the most money for your practices. So sometimes these are, tax attorneys. Sometimes these are CPA structures. Sometimes these are financial advisors. I happen to be a CEPA, but there are tremendous amounts of quality, skilled advisors that do that work. You just want to make sure that whenever you're going to consider selling any major asset or strip mall or real estate, that you've just looked at all the pieces of the puzzle so that you'll be happy with whatever decision you decide to make.
That emotional aspect that so many people neglect to consider, Jon, it just goes to proving the initial start of this conversation, the difference between financial advising and financial coaching, and the coaching that is involved in the work that you do every single day at J. Hagan Capital. If you have questions, if you are getting ready to, or you're thinking about, or one day down the line, you're going to be selling your business, it's so much more than the money. So seeking out somebody that can help you, that can coach you through the process, Jon is here to be that person with and for you. Visit us at retirementsolutionshow.com. We also have links posted in the show notes. Let's get to work helping you figure out your exit strategy. retirementsolutionshow.com.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Solution Podcast with Jon Hicks. Begin the conversation about your savings plan with Jon and the team at J. Hagan Capital by visiting retirementsolutionradio.com. Be sure to listen to Jon's radio show, The Retirement Solution, Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. on News Radio 840 WHAS.
J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is licensed in your state, please call 502-690-5635. J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency and does not provide legal or tax advice. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through J. Hagan Capital, LLC, NPN number 1882794.